Welcome to a ruined chapel by moonlight. I'm your host, Bertold Gambrel, and today I'm reviewing Casino Royale by Ian Fleming. The first thing I had to do before reading this book was try to forget everything I previously knew about James Bond. It's not easy. Even if you've never seen a Bond movie, you probably have absorbed some things about him from pop culture references. I've seen most of the films, so I had to consciously purge all memories of Bond-related media I had seen before reading this. Because this is the first Bond book, the one that started it all, and it seemed best to try to view it through fresh eyes as much as possible. Fleming's original character is a cold, efficient secret agent, and his mission is to defeat the communist operative Le Chiffre at Baccarat in order to disgrace him in the eyes of the party. The first half of the book involves long and fairly complicated descriptions of Baccarat, as well as some other casino games. Also, many of the terms are French, and Fleming assumes that his readers would be familiar with the language. Probably they were, because his intended audience was well educated, not savages such as myself. He made a high banco at chemin de fer whenever he heard one offered. If he lost, he would suivre once, and not chase it further if he lost the second time. K? To be fair, some of these terms get explained later on in the book. Vesper Lynd, Bond's assistant on this mission, serves as much as a plot device to have this stuff explained as she does a love interest. At first, I found it a little dull, but after a while I got absorbed in the high-stakes game. Fleming did a good job building the tension and making the reader sweat right along with Bond. And so, from the blank slate I'd consciously developed, the character of Bond as Fleming saw him starts to come into focus. It's funny to think now that the name is so iconic that Fleming's reason for naming him James Bond was because it seemed to him such an uninteresting and ordinary name. As for his looks, Vesper compares him to Hoagie Carmichael, who I had never heard of before, although Bond himself doesn't see it. Myself, I started picturing someone on the order of Basil Rathbone. Not bad-looking, but not terribly remarkable either. Maybe it's because Bond evokes another iconic English hero whom Rathbone did portray, Sherlock Holmes. He surveys everything with a calm detachment and largely avoids falling prey to emotional entanglement. Or so he tells himself. But during the first of those signature 007 car chases, his actions betray him. Sure, he may say to himself the woman he's racing to save means nothing to him, but he is driving 120 miles per hour at night to catch up with her kidnappers. In the end, of course, it's not just Bond's actions that betray him. This is a spy thriller, after all, and at the end of it, Bond is even more of a heartless, misogynistic, unsentimental SOB than he was at the beginning. Okay, I lied. I didn't actually erase all of my preconceived notions about Bond before reading this. But I promise, I did my best to forget about Connery, Craig, and everyone in between. Who I kept in mind was Patrick Dalzell-Job, a British intelligence officer who served under Fleming's command during World War II, and whose memoir, From Arctic Snow to Dust of Normandy, I recently read. Dalzell-Job is thought to have been Fleming's inspiration for the character of Bond, although his service seems to have been, if anything, way more exciting than Fleming's fiction. Dalzell-Job's memoir records no glamorous casinos, expensive meals, or fancy cars, and quite a lot of hiding out night after night on the coast of Norway, spying on the activities of the Kriegsmarine. On the other hand, Dalzell-Job does describe reassigning himself after the war without consulting his superior officer, in order to be closer to the woman he would eventually marry. Such roguish defiance of his superiors may have been in Fleming's mind when he was crafting his fictional spy. Anyway, I know I'm supposed to be reviewing Casino Royale, but I really do have to recommend From Arctic Snow to Dust of Normandy to anyone who enjoys reading about history. Dalzell-Job gives a clear, well-written, and extremely humble account of his heroic actions during the war. Truth is stranger than fiction, they say, and some of his real-life adventures are more breathtaking than any Bond story. But back to Casino Royale. The last quarter of the book makes no sense. I won't spoil it, but in essence, a bunch of suspicious stuff is going on, and Bond is blithely ignoring it. It's totally out of character for him based on how he behaved in the first part of the book, where he was meticulously paranoid about security measures and proud of it. Then at the end, he's reckless about obvious threats, and the only reason for this seems to be that he needed to be to make the plot work. I didn't care for the ending at all, which was too bad because I really liked the rest of it. It's well paced, interesting, and Bond was a good character, until he wasn't. To me, the book really should have ended with a fascinating conversation between Bond and his colleague Mathis, where Bond is waxing philosophical about his profession. Today we are fighting communism. Okay. If I'd been alive 50 years ago, the brand of conservatism we have today would have been damn near called communism, and we should have been told to go and fight that. History is moving pretty quickly these days, and the heroes and villains keep on changing parts. Can you imagine any of the cinematic incarnations of Bond saying that? I can't. Even better is Mathis's parting advice to Bond. Surround yourself with human beings, my dear James. They are easier to fight for than principles. This was my favorite chapter in the book, and really made the characters feel much more real and interesting. And then Fleming had to go and make a mess of it at the end. Oh well, it was still a good book, and I'm glad I read it. All told, I'd say I enjoyed it more than the majority of the Bond movies I've seen, including the 2006 adaptation of this very story. Even if you don't like the Bond franchise generally, it's still worth giving the book a try if you like thrillers. Alright, that's the end of the book review. What follows is just me going off on one of my hobby horses. Don't feel like you have to read it unless you are interested in minutiae. At one point, Bond is described as arming himself with a very flat .25 Beretta automatic with a skeleton grip, which he checks by removing the clip. This is apparently a Beretta M418. There is an interesting behind-the-scenes story about how Bond ultimately swapped it out for his signature Walther PPK, but what I'm interested in is the use of this word, clip. In this context, it sounds like he's talking about a magazine, not a clip. Peter Martuniak, who incidentally I have to thank for recommending Casino Royale to me, has written a post about distinguishing the two. But Fleming was a Navy officer, so I'm reluctant to automatically assume he was ignorant of the difference. Perhaps it's a difference between British and American lingo? Or am I missing something, and it really is a clip? This picture of the 418 shows a pretty definite magazine, though. Anyway, well, if you read all this nitpicking and found it interesting, perhaps you'll also enjoy this clip, pun intended, that I stumbled across while researching this. While it might be too big for a spy to carry discreetly, I think it's worth noting that a few years later, a .44 Magnum revolver would become an iconic cinematic weapon in its own right.